Jolise?
Jolise?
Jolise Rogers.
Okay, Jolise.
Be nice.
I got
Didn't say agreed with some, just,
finance.
that's what they said, it has on the website. So I was like, okay,
I have
we'll go on
one.
the list.
Came with my stuff.
This is roll it after you. Which is all good. I think that's small.
Everybody get Pat Betsy.
You have a number
Yeah.
that's long?
Hi, Bill.
Two sides, I like two sides, like a small intimate area, and then like a performance.
Sherry's still working?
Okay, we're gonna get started here in a minute.
She wanted to know if Sherry was still
Check.
alive. Your wife's still working.
Okay, check your cell phones, make sure they're off or silent.
Oh, angry.
Oh, my hands.
That was Park View. Yeah, it's Park View.
Why do they tell us about that the minute we start working?
The number or no? She's gonna be handling it. She's handling it, I'm not. It's
Okay, 6 o'clock.
It's gonna just be they can't do anything.
This is Barberton City Council. Tonight is a regular legislative meeting, but before we go into that meeting, we will have 5 committee meetings,
She can text me if she.
then go into the legislative. Okay, first committee up is Mr. Heidick with City Properties, Parks, and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties, Parks and Recreation is October 11th, 2021, 6 p.m. We are in the council chambers. All members are present of the committee, plus everyone else noted. We have no new requests for legislation. We have no pending legislation. And for miscellaneous discussion, I will open it up with a list I passed out, wish list from citizens that may or may not have filled out that survey the mayor put online for Lake Anna, kind of their wish list there. If anybody would like to add to it, I do intend on giving it to the mayor. Like I said, I know some people just don't fill out surveys online. They just get leery of it, or whatever their reasons are, they don't feel like clicking it. But that's what I've sorted out from the comments, filtering out things that were irrelevant versus things that were relevant. And the other thing I have for miscellaneous discussion, a few weeks ago I passed out not really a draft, but just kind of a working copy of a residential property initiative. I've already met with the planning department and got their feedback, so if anybody has any more feedback, please email it to me and concerns, or call me, and we'll see what we can't do with that. With that, do I have any miscellaneous discussion from the committee? From the body? From the gallery? Mr. Risley?
Yeah, I want to know why Tusk Park was shut down and what the rationale behind it was. I understand there's a shooting there. There's been very few, if at all, any other 911 calls to that area. That area of the city actually happens to be one of the safest areas in the city. The people involved were not from this community. It was a Band-Aid that the mayor put out, and quite honestly, it was lazy on every single party that was involved in it that shut that park down. We're still paying our taxes to be able to go to that park, and we're still paying the police, if I remember correctly, to actually show up and do their job and make sure that that park is safe. The bottom line is it should have never been shut down for any reason, and these people that you want to keep out of there, there's only 8 or 9 other parks that they're just going to go to next, Chrisman, Newton. They can just follow all over the city, so it's really not doing anything at all, other than hurting the people that are actually paying for it and the people that live in the community. So, why again did we shut it down?
Parks Director is right here. Mr. Patterson, maybe you can repeat that question, Mr. Patterson?
Director, Mr. Risley in the gallery was asking the rationale for shutting down the basketball courts at Tusk Park.
Actually, since he wasn't here, I'd like to tell him what I just said.
By all means.
Alright, so basically, there's not been, other than one other 911 call to Tuscarora Park this year, other than one involved in the shooting, and the shooting was involved with people outside the community. The decision, which was lazily made, was to shut down the park. We have a police department that's supposed to be protecting and serving the city. We have voters and people that pay taxes and live in the area. We shut down a park with 3 parks that are less than 2 miles away. So any of these people that came into our city who were already driving could have driven to any of the other, or can drive now to any of the parks. But we didn't shut down every park in the city. We shut down one specific park because of one specific incident. So that makes absolutely no sense on any accountability whatsoever. Why did we shut it down?
Director, before you answer, just to clarify for the record, the park itself isn't shut down, the basketball courts are.
Okay.
But I just,
Part of the park is.
yep, I just wanted to make that
So are any
clear.
of the other basketball courts shut down?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Is there any other park in any other area that shut down?
To my knowledge, no.
Has there been more 911 calls to Edward Park or to Elson Park or I guarantee you to Crispin Park than Tusk Park?
The police chief was here, he'd be able to answer, but Director, if you would like to
I'm
speak
hoping
about
the parks
Tusk.
And the director can answer this question, because if you're head of the parks and you're the director, you better be able to answer that question.
Answer to your question is that whole situation is under review right now. I had a meeting with the mayor, law director, and chief of police, and we are reviewing things right now.
What do you mean by review? Be specific.
Just procedures and more patrol and just things like that. We're not just reviewing Tusk, but we're reviewing all the parks. That's not the only park that we've had negative activities at. So we're in the process of reviewing it, and we'll have something for you here probably in the next week or so.
Again, why did we shut down that park if we didn't shut down any other parks? Because of one single incident from people that were involved outside of our community?
Director, if the mayor did give his rationale last week, I can get you a copy of that. Whether you agree with his rationale or
We're
not,
here speaking about this, we can just discuss it now. So if you know what the mayor's rationale behind it, let's hear it.
well, he's not here to give it. Like I said, I can give you a copy of what he said there. If I can, Mr. Risley, if I can summarize, the mayor said that because guns were involved, stray bullets involving the area of the neighborhood, the hospital, he was just too wary of having any sort of gunfire or any sort of gunplay that close to anything like that. Again, this is a summary of what the mayor said. This is not,
Okay.
So-
Did the mayor shut down Save a Lot today, the whole entire shopping center?
that,
So it was just one-
we don't own Save-A-Lot or that plaza, so that decision couldn't be with him.
Okay.
His decision, he did say that it was his decision alone, and he stands by it. Again, I'm paraphrasing him, so whether you agree with his
So he's
decision or
being
not,
lazy, putting a Band-Aid on it. You don't agree with it, and you don't agree with it.
I,
That's it.
I,
Do you agree with him shutting down the park?
I wouldn't say I don't agree with them,
No.
but like I said, it's under review.
Do you agree with him or not? I mean, it's simple. We're talking
I-
about our city here, so hold on. We're talking about our city, so do you agree with him or not to shut down that park?
Mr. Rizzi, again, it was the basketball court. The tennis courts are open, everything else is open. And while it may, my opinion on whether I agree with it or not, I do agree it should have been shut down while there was an investigation, but how long, I don't, that is not my call there. And if you, excuse me a second, Director?
Sure. Oh, I thought you were wanting me to wait until you were finished.
No, I was calling on you there.
Okay, I'm the Director of Public Safety and Human Resources. So it was an exchange of gunfire in a city park within a couple hundred feet of a hospital.
I live 2 blocks away. That hospital also has a police department inside the hospital.
Sure. So, but they don't own the park, we do. And it was a decision that I support as the safety director, as a 30-year law enforcement officer. It was the right call at that time. Now, it's under review, as the park director said, and it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It wasn't without thought. I just kind of take exception to that, and I'm happy to discuss it further if you'd like, but
To So why didn't you shut down the rest of the parks? Did the individuals that came?
Because there was a gunfight
Hold on.
between two sides, a
Hold on.
gunfight,
Mis-
an
Mr. Is-
exchange
I
of
understand
gunfire.
I understand what a gunfight is. I clearly understand what a
Okay,
gunfight is.
that's all I
okay?
have to say, Mr. Heidi, thank you.
My question
Thank you, Director.
directly then is, since we're discussing this, is this. If that's the case, could those people not attend another park? Could they not drive right now to another park?
That didn't happen.
It,
We could, what if,
If-
play
it
power
doesn't-
games all
Miss-
night long.
Mr. Risley, Director, if, excuse me.
This is unrelated, but I walked in late. Do you have a mask? Can you put on? We all have masks on. It's a
so when I
policy
came
to
in
have
here,
masks.
there was 4 city council members that didn't have them on. When I came in last week, there was a judge that didn't have it on, and 3 police officers that didn't have it on. So I appreciate you for what you're asking, and what you're doing is you're trying to distract us.
No. I
You
just
didn't
walked
do
in
it when
late.
you walked in. You walked in and 2
I looked around, I looked right at you, no one looked up at
Well,
the mask.
is it an actual law that I have to have a mask on?
Miss- miss-
It's a policy and procedure.
Mr. Risley, it's the policy of the city building, yes.
Okay. So is someone gonna have me removed from here?
No, I just think it's common courtesy to put a mask on,
Okay.
that's all.
I can appreciate your common courtesy.
Okay.
So, again, you say it's semantics, but these people
Did
drove
I say it
here.
was semantics? I didn't say it was semantics.
Okay. I'll refrain or take that comment back. They literally could have driven to any park and they still could drive to any park. They weren't from the city. It was a one-off incident. One was the last shooting that happened in Tusk Park.
I believe that to be irrelevant to the situation.
You've been here for 30 years. It's 100% relevant because I live in the area and I still feel very safe and I go there every day.
That's good, thank you for this comment. I'm finished, Mr. Heidi.
Thank you. Counselor?
I believe that there was another shooting in that area, because Mr. Leon Rick's car was shot in that same general area. You told us about his,
That was,
No, that was on Lambert.
that was on Lambert. That was
Okay.
Wilson Park.
not the, but there've been others, anyway.
So again, the
Thank you.
rationale is we shut down one park because of one incident, but we don't shut down the rest of the parks that people can still drive to.
It's a very highly visible park right there.
All of them are. Crispin, Newton, they all have houses, tons of houses around them.
I understand.
We're not
I don't
gonna-
understand why this is so upsetting to you, Mr. Isaac.
Because I use that park and I pay for it.
Then why wouldn't you want us to put a halt to it?
Because I want the
until we
police
can-
department to show up at least once a week and drive through there and
That's a
actually do
different
their
issue.
job.
That's a
I want,
completely different issue.
no, it's not.
Yes.
Miss-
The
Miss-
safety of the
Miss-
people is a different
Miss-
issue. You're our safety.
Mr.
director.
Risley.
And you're gonna tell me
Mr. Risley.
not showing up there isn't a safety issue.
No, no, it's a
Okay.
different issue from why did we close down the park?
You closed down the
That's a
park
different-
because of a knee-jerk reaction. You were
No, I-
lazy and
Miss-
thinking.
Miss-
They can't go anywhere
Miss-
else.
Mr. Risley, I believe the directors have answered your question, whether
She
you're...
actually said that she wasn't answering any more questions. Well, I mean, we have that on tape. So she didn't answer it. I asked her a direct question and she didn't answer it. So could these people go to any other park in the
Yes,
city?
absolutely.
Couldn't there be another shooting?
Sure,
Why didn't we shut them down?
because it didn't happen there at the other parks. It happened at that park on that day, at that time.
So we had a knee-jerk reaction. We shut it
Well, you
down.
can call it that. That's not what I'm calling it. And I think you're being very disrespectful.
Okay, you can say I'm being disrespectful. I think it was disrespectful that the city went in and shut down a park because of an incident that happened that could happen at any other park.
But it did happen there.
Okay, there was a robbing at Save-A-Lot today. Did you guys try and shut down, or 2 days ago, to a 16-year-old girl at knife point inside of the Save-A-Lot?
Once again,
There's stuff that happens all over.
Mr. Risley, once again, I'll remind you that that is private property and we don't have a say on...
You can remind me
with-
of that. I'm showing that there's incidences all over the place that happens in the city, and we don't
Correct.
shut down any other part of the city. We reacted to one incident.
Because we own the property, we do have to take the actions or responsibilities.
Okay, has there been
Again,
any-
whether you agree with it or not, that's,
Has there been any physical assaults at any other parks in the entire city this year?
I am not the police chief, I can't answer that.
Okay, I can answer that. See, I'm doing your job. I can already tell you that one.
Well, my job is the Parks and City Properties.
And to know what actually happens there. So, one lady was already robbed of her phone physically, so it was a physical altercation at Crispin Park, which a 63-year-old lady, her phone was taken. So we have a physical assault there, but we didn't shut down that part.
Well, the mayor's here. Mayor, if you would like to clarify Mr. Risley is questioning the decision to close the basketball courts at Tusk. If you would like to give the rationale that you gave last week, you have the floor. If not, he can meet you outside the chambers, and I give it to you.
Okay, either way, So we didn't close the park, we closed the basketball courts. There was a basketball game, 2 groups of people. I'm very familiar with the entire situation. So what do you want me to explain then? Well, I want to explain why it was a knee-jerk reaction to close down the courts. And I'll give you my example. So it was individuals that were outside of the city, that drove to the city, they drove to that specific park. It's one specific incident. Yes, guns were involved, and I clearly understand shooting. I clearly understand guns. I clearly understand it was next to the hospital, because it was literally 2 blocks away from me. I use that park all the time. Those same individuals could drive to any other park at any time, and they probably have been to other parks at times throughout the summer, yet we didn't shut down any of them. So we made a knee-jerk reaction for a safety to shut down that, when we should have actually involved the police and a bunch of other people to get them involved in it. But we chose not to. We chose to go in and say, hey, we have an incident here, we're gonna shut it down. There was an incident where a 63-year-old lady was robbed at Christmas Park, but you didn't shut it down. She was physically robbed, but you didn't shut it down. So where are you going with just shutting down one area? I mean, if you would shut them all down, if you just said, hey, I'm taking every basketball court down in the city, I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now.
Okay, so-
Because then I would have said, okay, he's trying to keep everybody from doing it.
So we're stepping up patrols in all parks. How many parks in the city are on a main thoroughfare?
Just about every one of them.
No.
How many parks are on the state route?
One's on a state route. But
How many
wait,
parks-
Wait,
that's right.
Mr. Risley, Mr. Risley, please let the mayor continue.
But baby, you
Please-
told me that it was public
please-
versus private, so now we're talking about the
Please-
state land, not the city.
Please,
So which one is it?
Mr. Risley, please allow the mayor to give his,
You're asking questions.
gives his take.
Time for response.
I'll give you an time, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to correlate that there's a higher volume of traffic near Tusk Park, so it's more visible when people are coming in that area versus a Chrisman or some of the other parks. Now, Decker might be one that is in the same situation, okay? So we also have next door a hospital that sees more than just Barvin patients, right? So there's more people from an extended region. There's, separate from, or aside from Chrisman Park, we had 2 groups of people playing basketball. That lady, I don't know the circumstances, she was at Chrisman Park, she wasn't playing basketball. If she was assaulted because of a basketball game, that would change things, okay? We have stepped up to patrols across the board, okay? So you have 2 groups of people playing basketball. Something happened, both groups of people pull out guns and start shooting at each other. So, based on the information I have, it was as a result of a basketball game. Therefore, we pinned up the nets. Doing nothing is not an answer. So I am working with the police department. I am working with everybody here internally. We are making headway, and it's just for a time being. It's not forever. If it was forever, we'd take the hoops down. We just pin the nets up. We want to make sure that people are safe. We want to make sure people are using the park, and if they don't feel safe, they're not going to use the park. And so I heard from a number, I didn't reach out to them, I heard from a number of residents that live in and around the park, who have kids of various ages who use the park. And some of the, as we were working on this internally, they provided the suggestion as well, as we were already working on it.
It's, okay, it's contradictory to about the 25 people that I walk around and talk to,
Okay, well, okay,
that live in that area.
okay.
So were the people you were talking to from that area?
Yeah,
Or were they just over the whole entire city?
No, some live directly across the street from there.
Okay.
Some live within walking distance. Some walk there from the surrounding area with their dogs or their kids. I mean, we didn't close the basketball courts because of them saying that, offering that suggestion, we're already working on it. But I did get some feedback from the residents, some of the residents, and the ones that offered feedback were appreciative.
So these people involved can't show up to another court then?
No, they could. I don't know, because when you were talking before, you used the word probably, almost every other word. They probably did this, probably did that. And you're right, they could go to another court. They probably will play to another court, all this. That's why we're stepping up patrols. This happened at Tusk Park. We're focused on Tusk Park right now. And we're looking at, there's been issues at all parks.
So real quick,
So we're looking-
I appreciate you
Let-
pulling out the probably statement, and you were thinking probably that there might be another incident there, correct?
If there's another incident, I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to be proactive.
I agree
To ensure
100%, but
safety.
shutting it down to the people that live there is inexcusable. I mean, the bottom line is if you want the safety there, actually have the cops show up. Anybody that knows me in here personally knows that I'm very, very, very pro-police. I go there all the time. I don't see any police officers at any of the parks, very rarely.
I see them there quite often.
Okay. I've never seen you at the park.
Good.
I'm there every night.
Well, that's,
Okay, we determined that.
okay. Well, with that, I am going to close out comments there because, Mr. Risley, have you gotten the answers? And I'm not asking you if you agree or disagree with the answers. Have you gotten your answers?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and I appreciate you coming in. Is there any other comments from the gallery?
I'll just follow up that we are looking at all parks, you know, whether it's vandalism to trash or assault or, you know, the incident at Tusk, you know, there's other incidents that we're looking at all the parks and how do we address these and how do we be proactive when it comes to making sure that our parks are safe and clean for all people to use them.
Thank you. Well, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this committee meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And we are adjourned at 6:18.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order the Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting. It's Monday, October 11th, 2021 at 6:19 in council chambers. All members of the committee are present, as well as all other council members. We have a request for legislation that was made by Mr. Greer, and it's continued from 9/27/2021. It's a letter from Justin Greer requesting legislation to amend section 674.02, notice A and B, and 674.04, cost of abatement, A1 and 2 of the Barberton codified ordinances. And as we discussed 2 weeks ago, this has to do with the nuisance law, and we decided to table it or leave it in committee until we got some answers from the chief. And so Mr. Greer sent some questions to the chief, some of the prime questions that we all were asking. And so I don't know, I didn't notice, Mr. Greer, did that go to all of us or just?
It went to the committee, and I forwarded it to the rest of council this morning, so.
Okay.
Everybody should have
So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to,
I didn't get it.
I didn't get it.
it.
I just looked at it when I got here, but
Everybody gets them.
what time?
Yeah, it's
This afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was recent, so.
Okay, because I was on there till 3.
I mean, we'll make them real quick.
Sure. She can make us copies. So while she's making the copies and everyone can read for themselves, since you posed the questions that we discussed, maybe I'll let you just sum up kind of what his answers included, just a general summary.
All right, thanks, Chair. Like Councilwoman Bevick mentioned, I reached out to the police chief with some questions that everybody was asking. And he provided some in-depth feedback, as you guys will see. But I'll just go down through the questions that I asked him, and I can read it verbatim. I'll paraphrase.
You know what? How about, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how about we discuss the rest of what's on our agenda, and
Yeah,
maybe
we can do
she'll
it.
be back by the time we are finished. So we do have one piece of, is that okay with you, Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
I didn't ask, but I apologize. We have one piece of pending legislation. It's ordinance number 113/2021. It's titled Enter into Contract with Stryker, and it's an ordinance authorizing the city of Barberton to enter into contract with Stryker in the amount of $467.24 for the purchase of 4 power load cot fastener systems and declaring an emergency. And we had some extensive conversation. Chief Persley gave us kind of a little preview, demonstration about why it was important, why he thought this was a good move, how it is becoming, it's quickly becoming the standard of care. And it's a protection for both our patients and our safety forces. So does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? I also think it's important just to remind everyone that it is going to be paid for over the course of 3 years using our fire levy money as it's a capital improvement. Okay, well, that's what we have on the agenda to vote on this evening. So, Lori's not back yet, so if you want to go ahead and start. And
I think it's in committee now anyways, so we can discuss. But to continue, I sent the police chief some questions about, well, some of the questions, actually all the questions that council asked. And I'll just say here what they are. So the first question I asked is, what are your thoughts on raising the fines for the nuisance? He said the police department shouldn't be determining fines, that it's ingrained in that they're not a revenue generator. However, that is for legislation and administration. He had no feedback. But he did say that at the end of the day, money affects the bottom line of a landlord, and it tends to get them moving. Second question I asked him was, how much goes into running a 360-day report rather than the current method that we use in a calendar year? He said it's technically simple enough to run the calls regardless of the dates involved. Number 3 was, will the rolling 365-day proposal change the increase of the number of nuisance letters being sent out? He said he's not sure on how that will affect, if it will increase it. He said it will, though, make it a little bit more difficult, or much more difficult, for Lieutenant White, as it's easier to track on a calendar year. And then he also mentioned in here, it's more about the process, and you can see it at number 3. It's more about his process on who determines when it starts and when it stops. Is it a council person? Is it the police officer, building, or law department? And he did mention that our systems for permits and fees are all calendar-based, and they operate on a complaint-driven system with multiple inputs of complaints. So that's what he was saying, who determines the complaints. This proposal, though, would not affect how the avenues of complaints. It would just simply how nuisances are calculated. Number 4 was, how effective is a warning letter currently, and how effective is a fine? He said writing letters have been extremely effective throughout the years. As mentioned earlier, the majority of all that we've sent ever have been to rental owners. Very few owner-occupied residents devolve into this end. So this year we have 2 addresses where letters have been ineffective and bills have been mailed. Number 5 was, and I asked him for general feedback, if he could provide suggestions for improvement of the overall process, perhaps sharing responsibilities with other departments to be more effective using other departments. And I'll let you guys read into this, but the very first part of this is he was mentioning mission creep, which is basically they're taking on more responsibility over time. And he goes into explaining the process of how a current nuisance call works. And you can read that. It's just a really, 1, 2, 3, it's about 4 or 5 paragraphs long. And he ended the email with, ultimately, though, the question to the answer first is, what is the goal of the thing? Police chief, in this long explanation for number 5, mentioned that he would love to see a collaboration between the building department, planning department, and police. And you guys can see the details and how that works. Me personally, when I read this, I see that as the end game for making something better. The ultimate, what we've been talking about for a couple months, are the teeth trying to follow through, improving the system. And so that is his responses that you guys have in front of you, and I can provide those responses for any public that want to look into it. So he answered all the questions to the best of his ability, and that's that.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. So I just want to weigh in. So one of the questions that, well, I have a couple statements. The first one is that one of the things that should concern all of us is that someone might not feel comfortable to call the police if there's an emergency because they're afraid of being fined, can't afford a fine. You know, the nuisance law, I think, is a slippery slope. I think it was put in place for a good cause, you know, to try to keep, you know, clean up the neighborhoods, maybe. And my second
Chair,
comment
Chair.
is, yes.
Safety Director had something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I mean, it's definitely not ever been the experience of the prosecutor's office that no one doesn't call the police because of the nuisance.
Okay.
That's never been our experience at all. If you go back and look at the files in whatever lieutenant, it's been the administrative lieutenant in the police department, the amount of letters sent in a year is minuscule.
Right.
Compared to the volume of police calls we have in this city.
Right. Thank you.
So it's not served as a deterrent for anyone in the city to call the police department.
Right. Thank you.
And domestic violence is excluded from the list of things that are a nuisance anyway.
Correct. The other comment that I wanted to make is that one of my concerns about this change would be, well, there are a couple of things. First of all, I don't like that it's subjective about who gets the letter and who doesn't get the letter, because we don't have, from my understanding, we don't have a process at this point where it just shoots, someone has 3 nuisance calls and it just shoots out that address. I could be wrong, I don't believe we do. Obviously, I mean, as members of the safety committee, we get a copy of those letters, and, I mean, I probably haven't had one in 2 months. So, that is, you know, so when you add on, they're already keeping track on from January 1st to December 31st. So if you ask them to start keeping track of this house from April 1st to April 1st, and then the house next door from, you know, September 2nd to, I think we aren't gonna, it's just not gonna be an easy task for the police. That's my thought process. I don't know if anyone agrees with me or disagrees, but go ahead.
No. Thank you, Chair. Given that with 1 year and the 365-day rolling options there, Mr. Greer, would it make sense on a logical standpoint, if we really want to put some teeth in this, to maybe just say out of the first half and the second half of the years? So you'd have a 6-month solid, January through the end of June and July through the end of the year, 3 in those periods? Maybe I'm just...
That would speak to the entire process. What I propose and what I stand by is what I presented.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to address what you were saying about the process and how they keep track of it. In talking with the chief, he says in here it's a complaint-based driven system. They know where the problem houses are at. And when they run, every time I've ran a report, the police chief and Lieutenant White have never had it on their desk. They probably know about it when I ask them about a house. But the way that it was explained to me is when there's a request to see if this house is a nuisance outside of the general police, what they do is they run a query that we can all do in a system that's on the website from all the way back to January 1st. And if it comes up, they go through it real fast. They filter out the stuff that doesn't qualify for a nuisance call, and they add those up. That's how they currently do it. The answer to number 2 on this would answer what Mrs. DeBevick was just saying. how it's ran in the system is, if it's October 11th and they get a nuisance call and they want to run a report from October 11th, they just run a report from October 11th, 2019 until October 11th, 2020. And then they count those instead of January 1st.
Right, but what my counter argument is his answer to number 3, which in my opinion contradicts what he says in how he answers
Right,
in
and I think-
question 2. And question 3 was more my thought process. You know, are we legislating just to legislate, and are we legislating for something that's not even going to make really a difference? You know, that was the importance of asking how many people is it going to affect?
I don't think it
How
was
many-
I don't think it was a coincidence that the first house I ever had an issue with that called, and this method would have helped. I can go back and I can run a report personally and probably pull out a handful more. This legislation is to be more effective, longer, right? So if a house is a nuisance in December and they got 2 calls and it's an active nuisance, January 1st it resets. How is that even remotely effective?
Right. So I mean, I absolutely agree with the premise, and that it isn't up to me, it's up to city council, and it's up to the committee to bring it out. All I'm saying is, I don't want to make more work for the officers.
Right, and
That's where my bottom line is, and so, I'm sorry, I can't see it, I can't see anyone. I believe Mrs. Wogajans had her hand up, and then Mr. Risley, you're next.
So, hello, if you guys remember, I did a ton of research on the nuisance law. Spent hours upon hours upon hours. And first point I'd like to make is, you know, I think before you go into taking the time to change a law, you know, see if it is going to make a difference. I've heard nothing yet that is going to convince me that it being a calendar year to rolling 365 days, I have heard nothing that convinces me that it's really going to make a difference. 1 house, 2 houses, really. Look over the last 5 years. That's how you're going to tell if it makes a difference. If you're going to be able to send more letters out to hopefully create a change. Secondly, I'm really glad that Director Miller did not find that it's discouraging people at Barwood. I think that speaks to our police force overall and the customer service that they provide. However, in general, research has shown that the nuisance law does increase homelessness, that it does discourage people from calling the police. You know, I fought very hard to have domestic violence victims and domestic disputes not included in this nuisance law. But I still have concerns about some of them, which is why even after the changes that were made on the last amendment, you know, I voted no. So, you know, incorrigible and unruly juveniles, you know, there could be a lot that goes into that. Now, I think our police department does evaluate each situation, you know, and they're not going to just try to punish, you know, a certain family or something. They know what's going on, they go out. However, at the same point, I really think it's important when we create laws to be consistent across the board. And, you know, like what Carla was saying, okay, Taylor comes and says, well, everyone's complaining about this house. Sorry, Taylor. Or I come and say, everyone's complaining about this house. And then those are the people that get, that get checked on. Now, you know, I just think we have to be careful about that. So I just wanted to say that. I've done a lot of research. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to pull up the things that I presented, you know, years ago. I still have it all. So just putting that out there.
Thank you. Mr. Risley, I believe you were next.
So what I'm about to say is dated for a while ago. We're talking 10 to 15 years ago. But this is what I can tell you. My mother was actually the one that was responsible for originally pulling all of the complaints that happened to the city, and she did it once a month. I have extensive knowledge of that because I was in her office when she was doing it and talking to her about different stuff. And I had one incident where there was a gunfight involved and a next door neighbor of my house. I had to go around because of the way that this law is written. They actually had 2 complaints at the first or the last part of the year. The same individuals got 1 complaint at the beginning of the year in which the gunfight happened. I had to go around personally and get about 25 to 30 people to sign a petition that I had in order to get those people removed from that area. Luckily, Muffet, the guy that was renting the property at the time, just kicked them out and moved them out. I can tell you that it would be much, much more effective if it's ran every other month or every month, and it's not hard. It's literally a click of a button. Instead of putting January 1, you put the first day of the month. It can be ran monthly, and it's something that should be done anyways. And for any person in here that says again that they don't want to add more of a burden to our police department, again, both my parents retired from there. That's what the police are for. They're here to protect us. They're here to show up at those places and enforce these laws and make sure the rest of us that aren't doing anything wrong are protected and can live freely, and we don't have to worry about stuff. There's a house right across from a gas station on Fifth Street that's had at least 5 complaints got to it by 4 different members of the community, and we personally right now cannot do anything about it. So if you drive by the house, every single one of you know which house it is, and right now you can't do anything about it because of the way that this law is written. So it's unfair to all of their neighbors that live around them. So it should be ran monthly, and it should be enforced. And the bottom line is this is the police department's job. We shouldn't be sitting there saying, well, we don't want them to do this or we don't want them to do that. It's their job. It's what we pay them for.
Mrs. Doherty has a comment, but Mrs. Doherty, if you don't mind, may I just make a comment real quick before? So I guess my concern is how many of those calls are related to the appearance of the house? So this is where I believe the chief says that there needs to be a collaboration between planning, building, and police. Because, you know, so the instance that you mentioned about the gunfight, I would say that was criminal. Yes, it's nuisance, but it's criminal. There should have been action taken because it was a criminal.
I'll give a little bit more information. There was 6 kids that lived in the house. None of them watched because the parents all went to work all day long. These kids literally terrorized about a 4-block radius, broke down basketball courts, threw trash in people's yards, walking around cussing at 2 o'clock in the morning, throwing rocks through the windows, and then eventually it led to the house doing a drive-by on the house. This house was 2 doors down from my house. So that's the backstory to that.
Okay, Mrs. Doherty.
I would still debate that 365 days, no matter where you put it, is going. There's no doubt that there's seasonality to crime, but there's crime in every season. So if it's the winter time, you might think calls go down. They do. It's just a different kind of call. You have burglaries at nighttime because it's so quiet. You've got bar fights because of drinking and it's cold outside and everybody's inside, or the football game's on. You've got Super Bowl Sunday. You've got domestic violence, which is included in this nuisance ordinance. I get that. But there's always things that are going on, and it's just a different season. Summertime is busy. It's busier for burglaries. It's busier for breaking into cars and taking bicycles out of garages that aren't shut. Not that it's the victim's fault, I'm just saying. So seasonality and criminality go together hand in hand all throughout the year. And I do think for simplification, January 1 to December 31, get you the same information as if it were to be on a rolling calendar year for any given home. So under what Mr. Risley is saying, let's run the addresses once a month. It sounds simple enough, but I don't know that our system works that way. You would end up generating every single incident report in the city of Barberton for that month, unless you gave an address or you gave a type of crime. And I don't know that our website does type of crime. I'd have to look. I don't know that it's that robust. But if you don't give it a type of, or if you don't give it an address, you're not going to come up with the same data. If you give it no address and plug in every address, you're going to come up with thousands of calls, thousands. I don't know how we would ferret through that in an efficient manner.
So real quick, I can tell you that at least 15 years ago, there was a program that did this. I don't know if it still existed. There was a person that specifically did this. And again, it was my mother. So when she was working downstairs, they ran this report once a month. So I know for a fact that at some point in time, this was already done. And there was a specific person. There's not a specific person. It doesn't have to be the chief. It doesn't have to be Lieutenant White. It can be anybody. I mean, you said that there's a way to run a program, correct? So it doesn't have to specifically be the chief of police. He should be, directing that to someone else.
Mr. Greer, are you saying that we currently have that capability?
I'm looking at it right now.
How are you doing it?
So you would type in the address. Now,
You're typing in an address.
Chief said that it's complaint-based driven, so complaint-based is an address given. I don't know, right? So if there's an address given,
That's not the same as collecting the data that Mr. Risley.
so how is it collected now, I guess is the question.
So real quick, on that program, all you would have to do is add couple line items on it that says, find anybody that has more than 3 complaints in the city in a given time.
Yeah, I don't think we built this.
Well, may not have built it, but it's not that hard to put into there. I mean, you change legislation up, every 2-3 months in here, we add line items to every computer program we have to do that. So if we're changing the legislation, we can add a line item, add, $1,000 to whatever you need to write the program so that it does it, or $2,000.
Chair, can I ask the safety director a question?
Sure.
How is the reports, how do we keep track of them now? What makes it different how we do it now? Because Chief told me this was the only system that we use. So what makes the difference now between if we ran a nuisance report across the board right now? How do they do that?
Okay, so what you're looking at is the public records website. It is not the robust, it is not the Sundance system with which the police department works. What you are looking at is,
This is powered by Sundance Systems,
but
Inc.
it's still a public record. You're not going to get every report that the city has generated. You will not get that from the website. You won't.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Right. So for example, that only contains the public record portion of any police report, and it does not allow you to sort and sort through the reports like it does if I go down to the police department and run a report, similar to what Mr. Risley's saying. So if I said to dispatch, or if I asked, and dispatch is now run by Swisscom, right? So Swisscom, which is a separate political subdivision, it's not the Barberton Police Department. It's the Council of Governments, is separate from us. If I ask them to run a report for a specific address with specific time frames, they can do that for me, for the law department, which is the prosecuting office for those jurisdictions. They can do that for me. And so can one of the lieutenants or one of the sergeants downstairs. So that's how that works. And it is powered by Sundance, but just like anything else, it's who is allowed to ask for those reports and who is allowed to be running those reports. So you sitting here on the internet don't have the capability to do that. One, because you don't have access to Swisscom's files. You have access to the city of Barberton's access to Swisscom's files. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the public front
Right.
access.
So it's different.
So
So that's
do we have a nuisance button we click and it generates?
absolutely not.
Then what's the difference on putting in a date and that's all, I guess, how do we determine, do we hit, show me the nuisance for this month, and then it just pops up? We'd have to have some type of, we input a date time, and they manually select January 1st. It would be, so that's, I guess what I'm saying, we're just giving them the option to select from today's date all the way 365 days instead of January 1st. If that would it be possible to see the system firsthand?
I don't know. I guess just from my perspective, you can do whatever you want, right? We function no matter what ordinances you pass. But the fact of the matter is that, our call volume, our case volume is higher than it's ever been. And you've listed 2 or 3, you've pulled very specific examples out of, if you went 10 years, you would probably find 10 examples of nuisance cases that got missed because we couldn't do a 365 window versus a calendar year. I would argue that the issue is not a rolling 12-month average. The issue is staffing and follow-through and our ability to coordinate resources in this city. That's the issue, in my opinion.
Sure, and that's what the chief mentioned.
I hope the issue isn't that, because if you're telling me for the safety of this city that it's about staffing and coordination, I'm going to tell you that's absolutely appalling as a city member, because it's already affected people in the area. It's affecting people right now in the area. And again, we better not be basing our decisions off of how much work we give to the police departments. That's their job. Again, we're paying them, or the prosecutors, or the judges. Their job is to protect us. So if you're telling me that we're going to base this decision on that it may or may not give, because you're saying 10 instances over 10 years, if you're telling me that we're going to base this decision, it's more effective for the people in the community that live around these nuisances to run this report. And if you're telling me that it's only going to be based off of maybe one every year, that it's gonna affect, then we're only adding one extra nuisance a year to the police department, to the prosecutors, and to other people.
Paul, I think you're confusing what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that, I think you're,
No, if I am, clarify.
Yeah, I don't think I'm speaking clearly, so that's okay.
No, you're-
So what I'm trying to say is, in the example that you gave, for example, I think that there's a combination of factors in the issue that you brought up, the house that you brought up. There's an issue of building, right? Because you were talking about the exterior of the home and the.
No, I'm talking about fireworks going across people's houses and screaming at the neighbors, the fact that there's people coming up every night to the side window of the house.
Right.
I'm talking about, I don't care
Right,
about the
but I mean, there's a
exterior.
variety of issues, right? And I think that that is, you know, the ability of everyone to come together and deal with that. And number one, and number two, a lot of times neighbors don't really want to be involved a lot of the times, and that's a problem that we need to help educate neighbors on how to effectively interact with us, right? And to be better advocates for themselves and communicate with us better. I mean, and maybe we're not doing a good job of that. And I would help with that in any way that I could. I think that when people bring that to my attention, I can certainly help with that. But, you know, I have a lot of opinions about how I think a lot of things need to be done, but those are all in my area of expertise. And so I have to defer to areas that aren't, you know, to the people that are in that area. So, I mean, you know, whatever you guys decide will function under that. But if I'm called on to ask my opinion, that was my opinion. That I'm not sure that that reaches your goal. But if you want to move it to the 365 rolling, we'll function under that. I'm just not sure that reaches your goal. If there's a house that is as bad as Paul is talking about, call my office. I'm happy to step in and fix a problem that's that bad. I absolutely have no idea of the house he's talking about, and that concerns me a lot, Paul. I wish I would have known. I would have absolutely helped with that, so.
I have one more thing to say, if you don't mind, I'll stop. I don't think that the only thing that it looks like that Mr. Greer is trying to pass here is for this program to be more effective. We're still running it on a one-year basis, we're still running it on everything else. The only difference is we're being more effective with it, going month to month, because like he said, if you get 2 calls in December, the 3rd call in January, this is a problem house, but we might have to wait all the way until September to deal with it. Now we're dealing with 5 calls, not 3.
And the same could happen in October, that the 3rd call is in November.
Right, but.
Sure, but it would be 365 days ago and not
It's
15 days ago.
365, correct.
Right.
They're not changing that it's a 1-year rolling thing. The only thing you're doing is making it more effective by updating the calendar every month with the nuisances. That's all you're doing. You're not changing the time frame that they're having, and you're still giving people 3 calls, nuisance calls to that house. You're just making it more efficient. And that's only helping the constituents. That's the only person that's helping.
Okay, I would like to, Mr. Griffin, you're
Yes.
on our committee, and I haven't heard a peep from you, my friend, so I
I'm
would
listening.
like
Every time
you.
somebody's got one hand up, 2 hands up.
I know,
2
so
people talking
you
at the
have
same
the
time.
floor. You are part of this decision-making.
I'm correct. And I was gonna say this. I have that problem in my neighborhood. I got 3 things now from Tammy, pictures, fines, whatever, the process, you know? And I've called on dogs and stuff like that, you know, and the police have cited them because it was 3rd time or something, and I just keep calling whenever. But I think we need to do something, and I think we should simplify it. Myself, I would just increase the fines and check on this, keep up with the records to see how it's working, you know what I mean? To enforce it more, you know? That's what I would do. I mean, I don't believe we should just go month to month or something changes drastically like that. I think we should just do the fine myself. I would be satisfied with the increase in fine and enforce it when it's time to do.
So, and I think we have to be really clear about this because it says over or after 3 calls. So it's not 3 calls. So on the 4th call is when the letter's generated. So maybe we want to look at after the second call.
After
Maybe
the
there,
second,
there are ways that maybe increase the probability of, you know, it falling better in a window that's easier for, you know, the police department to track. That's just a thought, but I mean, I'm indifferent as far as bringing it out of committee. I mean, this isn't for the three of us to decide, it's for all of city council to decide. So, does anyone else from city council, would you like to weigh in? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really
No,
weighing in
that's
on
okay.
whether or not it's a calendar year or 365 days. But what I want to know is, in here, it says things about who starts or stops the nuisance calling. And it appears to me, and I think that somebody brought this up in the last meeting, that these nuisances are generated by more than police calls. They're generated from property upkeep and those types of things. So you keep going back to the police department doing the 365 or the monthly or the yearly, but couldn't each of those departments, you know, run a report and find out that something happened in another department that creates a nuisance, and maybe they could work together to say.
I was gonna say, that's actually a really good idea, because the chances that they would have 3 offenses in different areas are probably pretty good, just as,
Well, it's probably where it
Right.
really comes from, is it comes from a number of places.
I don't think
And-
that would fall under this probably ordinance, though.
I would have to look at the nuisance call, the nuisance ordinance. That is a recommendation that the police chief made. He thinks it would be more effective if the duties of monitoring the nuisances were across the board. However, I'm just going to put this out here, that I presented this piece of legislation for the rolling 365 days. We can always pick something and improve it. This definitely needs to be improved. But I don't want to stall on the big improvements and not make this more effective now. But yeah, you're right. It needs to go across all the boards, and we need a bigger system. That's not something that we're going to do in a committee meeting. It's going to have to be something.
Absolutely.
And if I could add, and it has to go beyond the time period, it has to go to the departments so that we can, you know, get it from more sources than one.
So-
And not put it all on the
Yeah,
police.
and the nuisance law currently, the ordinance doesn't specifically say the police. However, the police chief is the one that runs the reports. That's why I dealt with him, because that's what I was really, he was like, hey, sorry, I can't, it's not a nuisance anymore. And I was just like, what? Like, how does that work? And he said, calendar year. Well, logically, I'm like, but there's been literally like 5 calls to this place, and we can't do anything. So that's why this came up, but.
So, as chair of the committee, does someone want to make a motion to call this out of committee?
May I make a suggestion, I
Yes.
guess? So here's my suggestion. We call it to the floor, if it has enough votes to get to the committee. I want to see the system firsthand, that they want to report. Sit down with the chief or whoever, Lieutenant White, and actually see how they do it, get, if that's possible. Go full 3 readings, and then see how we feel at the end of it.
And I'd like to actually meet with you as well. I think that Lieutenant White would, I think that's who usually generates the letter that
Right.
we receive.
Since there's no button that we click or to generate a report, it's complaint-based, so we run nuisance calls on request rather than, or reports on request rather than
Correct.
just showing up. Now, the police know that there's problem houses, and they may run those more, but I would, the way that it was explained to me is they're already using the addresses of known houses to run the reports. There's no magic button that just spits out, this is a nuisance house, or these are a
So
list.
someone has called and said, listen,
So-
I
and
called
that's
the
where-
police on my neighbor. And I also think it's really important to note that you have to make sure that your constituents are aware that they have to call the police for it to be
Correct.
3 times. Because they think, oh, I called once, but, oh, I'm so irritated, that dog's been out loose every day but then they don't call and there isn't a record. So I know it's hard because you don't want to call for a loose dog,
And-
right? But, if it's a nuisance.
I think this is a good segue into the changes we're making at the planning department right now with our inspectors. That's an active program that we're actively adopting or adapting currently. It would be maybe a good time to get them all on the table to talk.
Mrs. Doherty, did you have something that, I'm sorry, I cannot see this side of the
I know,
room at all,
I
I'm
should sit
too
up
short,
taller.
so.
I just wanted to conversely make a comment that they need to call the police, but they also need to be aware that not every call that they believe, it might be a nuisance to them.
Right.
But technically, it is not a nuisance, and I think the chief gives a couple of good examples in here of what your neighbor might find to be a nuisance, but the police department recognizes it as something other than, and much less than a nuisance. So that's just something to
Right.
kind of keep your people informed of,
Yeah.
your constituents.
Yes.
May I make a suggestion, or maybe this is coming from your comments now, is maybe redefining what nuisance is?
Yeah.
You know, we do meet, building, planning, fire, police, prosecutors, we do meet from time to time, if there's, true problem areas or homes. So we're gonna start meeting on a more regular basis, but, maybe redefining that, because you're right, I think, someone could have a nuisance call in February, not have another one until July, and not another until October, and then let's say November. That's not going to show up in anyone's mind because there's so many calls throughout a year. We just want to make sure that it truly is going to be effective, and there's an efficient way of doing it. So, and that would, come from the police, but maybe redefining what nuisance is
Yeah.
would help bring some of those synergies together to be more, have it be more effective.
Well, I think we've had a really good conversation, so would someone like to make a motion to bring this out of committee for 3 readings?
I'll make a motion to call for this piece of legislation.
Motion made by Mr. Greer, do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mrs.
Second by Mr. Griffin, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I would just like to comment that I would like to also see how it works so that I can make an informed decision as well.
We'll
Okay,
just include all, I'm sorry, we'll just maybe include all council members on it and see. It affects us all.
right, absolutely. Okay, we've taken up enough of the miscellaneous discussion for safety. Does someone have anything else?
Yeah, quick
Yeah.
miscellaneous. For ordinance 112, you're the owner of Magic City here. Mr. Hart, do you want to talk about that or
I'm
ask
sorry?
any questions?
Who are you speaking?
Mr. Hart, right here.
Okay.
Nothing? All right. I just saw you in the audience, but you want to say something.
Thank you. I can't see this side of the room, so. Okay, does anyone have anything else for safety? Hearing nothing, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin,
And I'll second.
second by Mr. Greer, and we are adjourned at, I think it's 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
7 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up is Rules, Marketing, and Development, and Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development. I would like to call this meeting to order today, Monday, October 11th. We are meeting in council chambers. All members are present and all others noted. Tonight, we have no requests for legislation, but we are open to miscellaneous discussion. Do we have any? Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. I'm just going to bring up that Councilman Heidick and I met back in March about some rule changes for council. And we have made up a list, and I would like to get that on the floor as soon as possible so that we can discuss that, about some of the things that I think need to be changed about council rules.
Yes,
Mr. Heidick.
Heidick.
Thank you, Chairman. She is correct, and I will have that list to you before our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay. So-
Yeah, there were some issues. What got me working on it was in January of this year, there was an article in the Akron Beacon Journal that was about the Akron City Council and the fact that they were changing rules because of some of the issues that were happening during their council meetings. And so therefore, I reached out to Akron City Council and got a list of the things that they had changed and how they conduct their meetings and so on and so forth. And I think that we could implement some of those within our council. And some of the things too that are going on may even be breaking sunshine laws, like having your cell phone during the meeting and things of that nature, having an electronic device other than the ones that you are given by the city. So I just wanted to get that out on the floor so that we can discuss it. And we don't have to discuss it today, but Mr. Heidick and I had met, like I said, and we made a list of things that we wanted to bring up for discussion. And so therefore, we should be doing that in the next week or so.
Chairman?
Okay, yes.
I'd also like to add that there were, on this list, there are other suggestions from other counselors, but I do not have names on them. I wanted to put it out just so that everybody knows that it's not just
It's
one
not
or
one
two
or two
person
people.
doing this. There was input from other counselors.
Okay.
Well, and that's the
So-
reason for bringing it up. They can have input during that time. It's not like we didn't create an ordinance or change the rules or what have you.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
are we in violation of sunshine laws if we have our cell phone during city council meeting? I'm just curious.
No, what you cannot do, and you cannot discuss matters amongst yourselves during council meetings by cell phone. So you cannot, so for example, you cannot text Mr. Greer and say, I don't like this ordinance that Mrs. Coburn is proposing, I think this is terrible.
Correct.
You cannot do that by text. You can, while you have, during a council meeting, if you were inclined, text Mr. DeBevick and say, pick up milk.
I was going to
You know,
say,
that
so,
we can do.
well, because I guess my point to that question is this, when it comes to that, before the pandemic, we met in individual meetings with just the people that were on the committee, and then anyone who wanted to, listen to legislation or information during that meeting. So, for some of us, we come home from work. I haven't been home from work today, and if it's not my meeting, I'm listening. If someone text messages me and it's my daughter, I'm going to text message her back. And I didn't know if I was in violation of the sunshine law by doing that. And that's just because we are not. I don't do that during the city council meeting, but we are in committee. We have to keep in mind right now we're in committee meetings, and I don't sit on this committee. Not that I shouldn't be paying attention. I am paying attention, but there was a time, 8 years of my council career, where we were not all in the same room for a meeting ever. I had never been to a utilities meeting because I had a meeting at the same time for all of my tenure on city council. So I think we have to think about things like that, like what are we limiting, and why are we limiting them, and are they limited during committee meetings, because that's not actual committee or the council meeting. So that's just food for thought, and that's my opinion.
Well, there's no rule that requires you all to be sitting in here during the meeting.
Well, I agree, and I'm not saying that I don't want to sit in here. I'm just saying that, I was just wondering, Mrs. Fry mentioned that we were breaking the sunshine law by possibly.
I'm saying might be,
Right.
and I did say, and it's, as
Well,
Mrs. Miller brought
the
up.
issue is that nobody knows what you're texting during the
Exactly.
meeting. I mean, that's the issue. So, I mean, there's an appearance and, but again, the issue about the texting issue is that, someone may ask for text, right? And if you're texting during a council meeting and someone says, I want text as a public record, someone's gonna have to ask you what your texts are. And that's just not something I wanna be doing. But
Right.
I'll have to if someone asks me for that. So, you know.
Okay, thank you. They're gonna have a fun conversation with my daughter.
Well, that's not a public record.
Okay, well,
It does not document
Good
the
enough.
business of the organization.
okay.
Mrs. Angelo?
Yes, I feel that, that couple hours, 2 hours, 3 hours that we're here, and, you know, unless there's an emergency and hopefully you have somebody at home or a spouse or something that can handle that. I just think that the number one complaint that I hear is city council sitting on their telephones.
Right.
Whether you're texting or whether you're looking at the weather, it doesn't make any difference because the citizens out there don't know what you're doing. And that's one of the complaints, you know, like, what, are you guys allowed to do that on city council? You know, that type thing. I think that it is a way of life. I can tell you, you know, you can't live without your cell phone. But I think if you make a commitment and you come into the meetings and you're going to be part of every committee meeting, whether you're on the committee or not, but you're going to voice your opinion, I just think that, you know, put the phone down, you know, leave it in your car or turn it off or whatever, because I just think it's kind of disrespectful. Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Height.
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to the issue of cell phones and other electronic devices, we are issued those city iPads, and trying to change rules to keep up with what would be the opportune thing is going to be a slow process. Ultimately, what I would like to see is that we only use the city, and now this is in time, this isn't something that can be done like this, but to only have our city-issued devices that, again, in time, residents could interact during our committee meetings. You know, Mr. Risley is here tonight. If he couldn't make it but still wanted to speak his piece, he could theoretically in the future live interaction with chairman, with committee members, with counselors. It's a slow process to open it up to the public that way, but I think this might be a good first step by putting that there so that we have that in front of us. That, I'll give you an example, and I don't think it counted it as any record. A couple weeks ago when I had a lung infection, there was a discussion, and I commented, it was public comment, on the YouTube stream, which our clerk graciously passed along there. But, you know, without being able to be remote, my say really doesn't, she had the ability to read it, other people could have, but if it goes by the wayside and she doesn't see it, or it's not an official thing, then that message isn't passed along. And like I said, I think once these, if we get to the point where we just use our city-issued device, then the next step in my logical plan would be that our residents could interact with us. And I think that would be a great way to go there. So that's just my opinion. Anybody can go with it?
No,
Chairman-
words are gonna
Chairman.
stop, like, this will lead to other things, like example.
Please, Mr. Jaber, address the
I'm
chair.
sorry, Mr. Griffin?
Okay, you have the floor.
Yes, example is, say, somebody's drinking water, I'm drinking Gatorade. You're gonna say, no, I'll drink Gatorade in this room? You only can drink water? You know, why are you guys trying to change the rules for us as individuals, as council members? I mean, that's just it's something you guys can look into.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Again, the reason I like it is because in the grand scheme, I would love for citizens to be able to interact
Right.
on one device in front of us that, let's say this conversation right now, comments would be made to this committee, which would appear on the chairman's city device that he could offer up to as basically a public record, because to our city devices would be that. It would be entered into record. And I think this is the first step in getting more people involved that couldn't make it down here. Like I said, my example is Mr. Risley over there. If he had to work tonight, but during that Parks Committee meeting really wanted to make his point known, he had no other way to do that if he wasn't here. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Director Doherty was.
I
Mrs.
just have a
Doherty.
comment. There's those of us that are in the gallery that would normally, at pre-COVID, have been up front. And so it's just too close quarters up there. So now we're in the back, and a hot issue topic like tonight, whatever, the park closing down. That we have a few more people here than we did maybe a week ago. But there will be a time when this gets filled up, and there are those that are employees, directors, and citizens, most importantly, that would maybe rather not be subjected to people either not wearing masks, not being vaccinated, or being sick, coughing, who knows, or just would rather not because it doesn't feel safe to them. So I've asked to have all council people, they were issued iPads. I would really like to see those being used. I have had a complicated medical history that may or may not contribute to my inability to be in this room at any given time. I'm just saying, there's a lot of folks like that, not me, not just me, but a lot of folks that would really like to participate in this political environment, but maybe can't for personal reasons, medical reasons, whatever, or physically. It's difficult for them to get down here, even though they would love to share their opinion in a live environment. I don't see why that can't be done, that's all.
Thank you, Mrs.
If I
Doherty.
may, one more time, Chair.
One more time.
To do that, I think would require, and Mr. Greer, you would know more about the technology of our iPads than I do, would require some tweaking, would it not?
We would have to, we can just go right back to doing like the live stream stuff that we did before, using GoToMeeting or whatever.
But let's say in the instance right now is the Rules Committee, which Counselor Griffin chairs. If a comment were to come through, could it theoretically be forwarded straight to that person?
Oh, absolutely, with custom software. However, I do want to clarify that public can interact with council now through the live stream. And not, but I do like the idea of interacting individuals too as well. We can't see that unless we pull it up on our devices, but we all have the ability, we all have the tablets. We can open up YouTube right now and see the comments live currently, but we could.
When we turn these committee reports in, those iPads could just as easily have those comments downloaded straight to it to be a part of committee minutes, could it not?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. My thoughts on the cell phones is the fact that no one knows what you're doing. It's just, you're doing something, it's a distraction, and people say, okay, well, he's on a cell phone, he's not paying attention, he's not doing that. I think that's where it's at right there, because they don't know whether you're texting somebody here, or they don't know whether you're looking at a movie or talking to your girl, whatever, and they think, well, so my problem is, it was not a problem. I'd rather not have them. I would rather have something that's owned by what we've been issued for everybody to use. That's me. Because to me, it just doesn't look proper. It just doesn't look official. I don't have mine, And if I have an emergency, I tell my wife, call the police. They'll come up here and get me. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. They'll come up here. But that's me, Does anyone else have anything else you want to add to this? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick, Mr. Jaber. We are adjourned at, I have 7:15 here. That clock's wrong, but, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is City Utilities and Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you. It's October 11th, 2021. All members of the Utility Committee are present. Oh, thank you. All right. I'd like to call the City Utilities to order. We are in chambers. All members are present and all others as noted. Tonight's topic of discussion is we do have a request for legislation that we need to vote on tonight, and we will have to, if the committee would like to call for this, we have to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 301, the 10-day rule, and Council Rule 401, not called for in committee of the whole. This is a resolution request. It's for the stormwater. Do I have a motion to invoke those rules?
Can we have kind of an explanation of what it's for, why
Sure.
we're invoking, why it's late? I don't, oh, I guess I do have a letter, I apologize.
Yeah, we received a letter from the executive Shapiro requesting that the resolution declare the week of October 17th through the 23rd as Stormwater Awareness Week in Summit County. And we would like to have the city's resolution be the same time frame.
Okay, yeah, we don't have, I don't know, I don't have that letter requesting it, so I'm just curious, so. Did we know this, when did Summit County Council pass this? When did we know?
They just notified us on Thursday that we needed to do this.
Okay.
So everything applies, is that just to be in conjunction with Summit County is the only reason, and this is a resolution naming the week Stormwater Week.
Okay. Do we have to have a letter with the request? Mrs. Knowles?
I got you didn't get a copy of the letter?
I don't have a letter.
All basically the letter said was, Lori, can you help me with this? And that what we have attached is what was attached.
Carla, here's,
She has
No, I
that.
have that. That's not a letter. That's not a letter that we get that requests legislation and why it's an emergency, and I'm just asking if anybody else got a letter and if we were following procedure by not having the letter.
The letter is supposed to be from Caroline Crawford, from Stormwater.
I mean,
okay.
it's not a big deal. I'm just,
It says there's a letter.
Does Lori, do you have a copy of that later? I can go print it off. It was merely an email that said, Lori, can you help me with this? And it was the email from the mayor to Caroline requesting that we do this legislation. I can print that email off right now. I can go downstairs and print it off.
Do we have to have a letter to do this resolution?
Did Caroline not send a letter?
Not a formal letter.
She sent an email
no.
saying, can you help me with this? So Joyce didn't print it. She just, I mean, not Joyce, I'm sorry,
But no,
Lori
we
didn't
do not
print it.
have a letter, Mrs. Miller. We just have the,
So you're just in committee right now?
yes, ma'am.
So you can, she should send the letter, so you can call for it pending receipt of the letter.
Okay, but we're supposed to vote on it tonight.
Oh, you're calling for it and voting on it tonight?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
we had to invoke all the rules to do
I
that.
thought it was called for and voted on, I thought she needed it by the following week.
No, because they needed it done by the 17th, so to be voted on, the next committee, the next legislative would have been the 25th.
So we can just wait and pass it next Monday, if that's okay,
We
pending the letter?
won't be in
You can
legislative
have-
next
you can
Monday.
call, if council wants, you can call for a special legislative meeting. Again, we received this request on Thursday. I apologize, there wasn't a formal letter. This not only, it's just a resolution, does help us with the county to stay in good order with them, but also with any type of grant that we apply for associated with stormwater, being able to designate a week, stormwater week, goes a long way with the community's taking this seriously, working with our partners at the county level.
Just for clarification, Chair, I'm not opposed to the legislation at all. I just want, there are
We
rules
wanna
in
do it
place.
right.
And we want to be sure that we, have the proper attachments necessary.
So you would need to that, if you're going to follow the rule, then you would not call for it, and you're going to have a special meeting next week. Those are your only choices. You either print it out and accept that as a letter, call, waive the rules, and vote for it tonight, choice A. Choice B is to have a letter and call for a special meeting next week. That's choice A and choice B.
It doesn't matter.
So we can just get the printout of the email and use that. Is everyone okay with that, Mr. Heidick?
Oh, thank you, Chair. We do require a letter under 301A. A member or city administration requesting legislation shall submit a letter to the chair of the appropriate committee with each copy to committee members, council president, and clerk. So we do have to have something, and then it would be up to you, Chair, if that letter, that printout is acceptable.
Joyce, would you like me to go print it off?
Yes, please print it out. And Mrs.
Well, I think there was a piece of legislation that you requested, and I never got a letter on it. It was just an email.
Well, that's what we're gonna get is the
Well, but I
email
said,
printout.
he just said Rule 301, and I never got a letter. And I didn't even get the email. It was forwarded on to me, but there was never a formal letter. So, and this went to, Caroline sent it to Lori and Renee, and the piece of legislation was typed. So,
Did the-
the same thing. I didn't get a letter.
But did the committee get this one as well?
My committee never got the letter, I never got the letter on the amusement devices. There was never a formal letter, it was just an email. And it wasn't even addressed to me.
In order, President, thank you.
I'm chair of the committee. I asked them to,
He's a president, he should take this
no,
too.
this is
This is
committee,
her
Mr.
committee.
Jabers. This is my
Thank
committee.
you. Thanks for clarifying that, Mrs. Coburn.
We will wait till we get the email. Mr. Heidick, yes?
Thank you. Once there is an email, then it is up to the chair, Councilor Angeloff, it's up to the chair to accept that as a letter of
Letter.
request or to deny that as a letter of request.
As my committee members, are you guys okay with the
I'm okay
email
with
so
it.
we can?
Yes,
okay.
fine.
We will wait for the email to come. We'll go ahead and discuss. The next thing is we have a request for an appointment, a letter from Mr. Judge requesting the appointment of Mr. Patrick Betts to the Utilities Appeal Board, a 3-year term starting 1/1/22 to 12/31/24. His application was filled out and was with our packets. Did everyone get his application?
Yes.
There, any remarks on Mr. Betts?
No, I didn't see his application. It's okay. Mr. Besson, it's perfectly fine, but no, yeah. Oh, yes, I do have that.
I was gonna say
I apologize. I do have it. I looked
Okay.
at it.
Do I have any?
I'll just say that Pat is very involved in the city, and he has come to so many council meetings, and he knows a lot about what's going on, and he has already been on this committee, and I think that he's a great candidate.
I would like to second your comments. I think he's,
Does anyone from the rest of council have anything to say? Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion to call for it.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
And we are waiting on our printout. If this was anything other than a resolution, I would absolutely
Agreed.
require us to do something different. But as a
Sure.
resolution, yes, sir.
If you accept this email as a letter for this evening and pass this out of committee, I will see that you get a letter, more official letter tomorrow.
Appreciate that, Mr. Mayor Judge. We are going to, as soon as we get our email printed out here. Do I have to read all the invoke stuff all over again, Mrs. Miller?
Did you read it already?
I already read it once. Okay, thank you. We just want to do it right. Sorry for the holdup, but we will do it right here in just a few minutes.
It's gotta be yesterday. Just a average day, but first year ever.
How about miscellaneous
Oh, do we have
discussion?
any other miscellaneous discussion for utilities? Mr. Judge? Thank you. Thank you. Don't anybody fall asleep now. We're still in committee.
Can we look at getting her a printer down here, maybe? To save her walking back and forth in the future.
I'm not sure.
That might be
It'd be nice to get her a printer down here.
I wonder if her, if she can access her stuff on this computer, because it's the cords.
Yeah.
I wonder if she can access it.
We have the iPad, maybe.
She has her iPad.
Yeah,
I think she has an
and
iPad.
that's a good example of using your iPads.
Well, they don't, it still needs to be set up to do that.
And back to that, I think it'd be good if we did it during legislation for sure.
Oh, yeah.
You know, committee meetings, we can't control that. We got a committee, you know.
Right, but if something pops up, you know, if somebody,
Right, current legislation.
There was any-
Before it's a different committee. You know, we're just sitting there, that person don't be there.
right, but if somebody wanted to make a comment on utilities, it would get entered straight to Roy's.
Yeah.
You know, during legislation meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Meetings like this.
I'm not,
Yeah, definitely legislative.
Oh, yeah.
oh, I couldn't.
That's the perception.
That's what.
Try to eliminate. But try to eliminate.
Oh, yeah, because there's no commenting at all anyway.
Just put less attention on
Thank
it.
you.
Poor Lori.
Thank
You might
very
as
much.
But like, see, if
get them to,
Oh, it's a, this is the
Somebody wants to
letter.
comment.
Oh, we actually have the
you,
letter?
Roy's, so that if I miss it, you two can
Okay,
say,
thank you,
we have a
Mr.
comment
Tracy.
here.
As it turns out, we do have a letter tonight. We have a letter from Mr. Tracy. Please request the necessary legislation declaring the week of October 17th through October 23rd, 2021 as Stormwater Week in the city of Barberton. Please consider emergency wording and one reading as we were just notified of this from Summit County. Everyone, do we have any other discussion on this request?
none.
I've already invoked all the rules, so do I
Well,
have?
do we have to vote on
Yeah,
invoking? Okay, I'm
We
sorry.
have to vote on invoking the rules, yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to invoke the rules, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I got two.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
And now we need to,
call for this legislation.
right, so we need our own, let's make our own little things here. And I will make a motion to call for it.
And I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we had, a motion was made to call for the resolution and declaring October 17th through the 23rd Stormwater Awareness Week.
And Chair, if I may, or just for clarification, we are going to vote on this evening then, correct?
Yes, we are. Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
We'll be calling for that today and voting on it tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Yes, sir.
The request for.
Yeah, thank you for getting
Already
that
did it.
through committee tonight. I just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, this was real late notice coming in from the county, but we already have plans next week for just kind of a social media campaign, talking about our NPDES permits on one day, and then another day talk about flooding, another day talk about different types of storm events, sizes, inches of rainfall, another day talking about stormwater maintenance in the city, and, you know, moving on to tips for stormwater best practices, things like that. So on a short notice, we're putting things together to do a social media campaign throughout the week next week, just highlighting certain portions of stormwater in the city. In the future, hopefully we can look at some events or something surrounding stormwater.
Thanks for the letter, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Appreciate your help. So now do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion.
I second it.
We are adjourned at 7:35.
Okay, last but not least is Finance and Personnel with Mrs. Fry, and there again, you have nothing.
Right?
That's amazing. 2 weeks in a row.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. President. It is Monday, October 11th. It is 7:35 p.m. We are in council chambers. All members of the committee are present, as well as all council members and guests as noted on my agenda sheet. We have no requests for legislation this evening, and we do not have any pending legislation. However, we do have the financial report for the month of September 2021. Therefore, if Mr. Laker would be so kind as to guide us through that, we'll go over the report.
All right.
Thanks.
Starting with the health insurance fund, the revenues for the month of September was $390,000, expenditures $355,000. Our unexpended fund balance is $1,324,000. Our year-to-date revenues, $3,258,000. Year-to-date expenditures, $2,944,000, giving us a net year-to-date of a positive almost $314,000. Looking at the income tax analysis, our estimate for the month of September was $815,000. Actual came in at $898,000. That is about $80,000 above our estimate. Our year-to-date estimate is $8,725,000. Actual, $8,897,000. We are about almost 2% over our estimate for the year. In comparison to last year, we were 1.5% under our estimate at the same time. But a lot of that last year had to deal with CCA being backlogged due to the pandemic. We transferred $850,000 from the income tax fund to the general fund. We also transferred $20,000 to the emergency reserve fund. We still need to transfer $1,750,000 from the income tax fund to the general fund, and an additional $230,000 to the emergency reserve fund to meet the transfers that was in the budget ordinance at the beginning of this year. Moving on to the statement of cash position and statement of cash receipts and disbursements, we have a few funds in the negative. The first one is the FEMA fund. That is the fund where our assistance to firefighters grants for the radios was paid through there. We have to pay the money out to get the money back. Same way with the CDBG fund, Fund 250, that is in the negative as well, as everyone is aware. That is our HUD grant, federal grant, and once we pay the money out, the federal government will reimburse us for that. The only other fund that's in the negative is the internal cost allocation fund, and that is due to the encumbrances outstanding for fuel. Once we pay those fuel bills and we do the chargebacks at the end of the month, that balance should stay, the cash balance should stay roughly the same and get that out of the negative. Looking at the last 3 months of activity, general fund has stayed basically the same. Special revenue funds has stayed basically the same. Enterprise funds has stayed basically the same. And all other funds has actually went up. It was increasing by about 300,000, went up about 600,000. A lot of that has to deal with us receiving the property tax in the month of September from Summit County. Comparing September of 2020 to September of 2021, you will notice that the general fund is up by about 1.7 million. A lot of that still has to do with CARES Act coming in last year. We had our second round of Summit County money coming in around this time last year, along with the second round of the CARES Act, the additional money we did with the CARES Act. That was all around this time last year. So you'll notice in the next couple of months, those balances should be starting to even out. Our special revenue funds is up by about $10 million. Big driving force in that is the ARPA funds that we received. It was a little over $8 million. That's what's driving a large portion of that. Not only that, we have less transfers to this date so far. So that is another reason why that fund is up. Enterprise funds is up by about $1 million. A lot of that has to do with the receipts being up, disbursements being down, and encumbrances being down. Those combinations of everything is causing is letting those funds be up by about 1.2 million as compared to last year. And all other funds is up by about 90,000. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Flaker. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Flaker about the report? Seeing no hands up, do I have a motion to accept the finance report? Mrs. Angela made a motion.
I'll second it.
And seconded by Mrs. Bebevic. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Does anyone have any miscellaneous discussion for this evening? Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thanks for the ARP meeting notes. You mentioned last week that you didn't think anybody read them, but
Yeah, I don't.
I didn't get a chance to catch up with you, but we do read them. It's more just updates, so.
Yeah, it's pretty basic. It's the same thing every week, but thank you for saying that. Mr. Heidig?
I do look for that all the time myself, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, seeing no hands, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Angela?
I will second that.
And seconded by Mrs. DeBevick, and we are adjourned at 7:43. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take a 2-minute break. It's late, so make sure it's 2 minutes.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, well, thanks for
I just
it.
didn't know if we broke the rule if it made it.
So PJ coming out tonight. You love cutting yesterday?
I'm not running, Carla. It's your turn.
Anything?
It's what?
Nice.
I'm too late. I'm tired.
No, I meant for the restroom.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, turn it off, or it'll just keep going and going.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for
Thanks for
I didn't realize that I didn't have
I got those. So, I guess there was so
Work on that.
Japanese people over here that were dedicated on that.
then it had Marshall. I
I'm ordered. 9. I can't wait. 15 years almost. I'll be like a couple months short. It's a long time. Well, yeah. Well, when I was a ward, I loved being a ward. I wish I'd never left. Right. I wish I'd never left. Who'd have known it changed the whole demographic? Right, you're right. Right. What's it? Oh, I'm behind you 100%. That's up tonight, right?
Right next, right, the building, you got,
Okay, we got it. Thank you. Okay, let's get started.
no, it's a historic building.
Okay, this is a regular legislative meeting of the Barberton City Council. This is Monday, October 11th, 2021. The time is 7:45. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Mr. Greer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, as we come together to discuss matters within our city, help us remember that the only true way forward is through you and your guidance. In times where the world can seem so grim, shed light onto the darkness and peace onto the hate. Grant us the courage to know and do what is right for the city and its residents. Lord, lastly and most importantly, look over our first responders, nurses, teachers, and soldiers as they put aside personal feelings and fears to make sure that the present protects the future and the future is the best that it can be. And as always, remember the 22. Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Here.
Mr. Heidick?
Here.
Mr. Greer?
Present.
Mrs. Angela?
Here.
Mr. Rittman?
Here.
Mr. Jaber?
Here.
Mrs. Coburn?
Here.
Mrs. Fry? Here.
Okay, approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, September 27, 2021, as presented. Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, as presented.
Thank you, and Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. DeBevick's motion to approve the minutes from the Monday, September 27, 2021 meeting.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mrs. Fry to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. Approval of the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, as presented. Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the legislative session held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, as presented.
Thank you, and Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. DeBevick's motion to approve the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 27th, 2021.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mrs. Fry to approve the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. Approval of the financial report for the month of September 2021, as presented. Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the Finance Department report for the month of September 2021 as presented.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on acceptance of the finance report for September 2021.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to approve the finance report for the month of September 2021 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Financial report is adopted. Petitions and claims.
We have none.
Matters requested.
They've been emailed in the packet.
Citizens addressing council, we have one. Mr. Risley, when you come up to the podium there, state your name and your address and the subject you bring before city council.
Paul Risley, 25 Fifth Street Northeast, obviously Barberton. I would like to address, I guess you guys are doing a third reading or a reading tonight in reference to eliminating gambling out of the city, not by eliminating them directly, but by not bringing or renewing them as they go out of business, get sold off, or anything else. We'd be eliminating about $100,000 of income into the city. We'd be eliminating jobs into the city. We'd be devaluing the buildings that they're in because we would have more openings in the city. Someone had brought up that people have petitioned about them being a nuisance or a problem. That was 1 in 15 years. So whoever brought that up didn't educate themselves on it. And then the next thing is why would we ever want to get rid of them if they're not a problem for our city? They're not creating 911 calls, or they're not creating any other issues that are here. It's just people being uneducated about what they really are. My education on them is my brother owned them for 3 years, and I worked in them every single day of my life from the time I was 18 until I was 21. So I've seen personally the people that come through those doors. I've seen any issues over 3 years of experience working 30 to 40 hours a week in them. And I think that whoever is voting against them or trying to eliminate them is very uneducated on what actually happens inside of those areas. So you guys that are putting them out there, you're trying to cost the city tax dollars that we can't afford to get rid of. You're trying to cost us jobs that we can't afford to get rid of. we're devaluing the buildings in this area, which is absolutely absurd. And you're not educated on actually who's coming through the door, because if you think they're a problem, go sit in one for an hour, 2 hours randomly throughout the day. Because I can guarantee you anybody that's voting against them has not. And I have no skin in the game. I don't own them, haven't been in one, I don't gamble. So I've just, let me rephrase that, I haven't been in one in 10 to 12 years. But I think 3 years of experience in one every day of my life suffices to be able to tell you guys that they're not a problem and you're throwing away tax dollars. So I just don't understand where you guys were even coming up with wanting to get rid of these. Thank you.
Thank you. First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 113-2021, presented by Mrs. DeBevick. Title, enter into contract Stryker. An ordinance authorizing the city of Barberton to enter into a contract with Stryker in the amount of $93,467.24 for the purchase of 4 Power Load top fastener systems and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, and Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. DeBevick's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Greer to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 113, 2021.
Thank you, and Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. DeBevick's motion for adoption of ordinance number 113-2021.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Greer to adopt ordinance number 113-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
The following resolution, 114-2021, was voted on in the Utilities Committee meeting this evening and added to the agenda. The committee invoked Council Rule 702 to suspend Rule 302, the 10-day rule, and 401, the not called for in the Committee of the Whole. Resolution 114-2021, presented by Mrs. Coburn. Title, Stormwater Week. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton declaring the week of October 17th through October 23rd, 2021, Stormwater Week in the City of Barberton and declaring it an emergency.
Motion to suspend.
You stated that we invoked Council Rule 302.
301.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify that first.
Yes, Council Rule 301, the 10-day rule.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to suspend.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and second by Mrs. Fry to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Resolution Number 114, 2021.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to adopt resolution number 114-2021.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and second by Mrs. Fry to adopt resolution number 114, 2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Hyden.
Yes.
This ends the first reading.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 112-2021, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, amend Barberton Codified Ordinances, amusement devices, skill-based games, amusement machines, and arcades. An ordinance amending section 836.04B of the Barberton Codified Ordinances, license fee, transfer, and display of amusement devices, skill-based amusement machines, and arcades. Ordinance number 53-2012. This will go for a third reading, and this ends the second reading.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 99-2021, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, zoning map amendment, various parcels, Norton Avenue. An ordinance authorizing the rezoning of various parcels of Norton Avenue. Parcel 01.15727, 01.13934, 01.13935, 01.02305 be rezoned from C3 Community Center Commercial to I2 Medium Industrial, and parcel 01.11042 be rezoned from RT-40 two-family to I2 Medium Industrial.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 99-2021 be adopted.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Angeloff's motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and second by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 99, 2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ordinance number 100-2021, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, zoning map amendment, various parcels, George Street. An ordinance authorizing the rezoning of various parcels on George Street. Parcel 01.08632, 01.08624, and 01.08631 be rezoned from RS40 single family detached to RM18 resident multifamily.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 100-2021 be adopted.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for adoption.
A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and second by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 100, 2021. Are there any remarks? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. This property is currently zoned RS40 residential single family. To rezone it to multifamily may not be in the best interest of the neighborhood. Therefore, I will be voting no on this rezoning.
Okay, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be voting no on this resolution, as I think it is spot zoning and not in our best interest.
Thank you. Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no based on there's well over 500 parcels in that neighborhood that are all already zoned the RS40, and to rezone it to RM18 residential multifamily would disrupt the harmony of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no on this piece of legislation as well, primarily because of the water. I'm concerned about the flooding in that region and how this will affect that. So for that reason, I will be voting no this evening.
Okay, Mrs. Fry.
I also will be voting no tonight based on all of the reasons already
Right.
given by the responsible people.
Mr. Griffin, I'll be voting no too, because like Mr. Heidick says, we have over 500 RS-40 there. So if you let this one go, then what's going to stop it? You know, and what's your reason for stopping the other ones? And then like Mrs. DeBevick stated, we do have a flooding problem, and this would just add to it. And there's already too many rentals in the area anyway. We just flooded with them. So I don't think we need at least a multifamily, two-unit. We don't need that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say that the only reason I am voting no for this is because he's agreed to come back to the table. It's not like he's going to come back to the table and work on the proper zoning, within the bounds of the proper zoning, so, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Frye?
No.
Mr. Greer?
No.
Mrs. Coburn?
No.
Mrs. DeBevick?
No.
Mrs. Angeloff?
No.
Mr. Griffin?
No.
Mr. Heidick?
No.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
This ends the third reading.
Okay. Appointments.
We have an appointment to the Board of Health for Mr. Tyrell Fletcher for a 5-year term beginning January 1st, 2022 and ending on December 31st, 2026.
Do I have a motion to call for this? Mr. Jaber.
Yes. I'd like to call for the appointment of Mr. Fletcher for a 5-year term from 1/1/2022 to 12/31/2026.
Thank you. And Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to second the motion to approve Mr. Fletcher for a 5-year term.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Jaber and second by Mr. Griffin to appoint Mr. Tyrell Fletcher to the Board of Health for a 5-year term commencing January 1st, 2022 and ending on December 31st, 2026. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Board of Zoning, Mr. James Haskell, a 6-year term starting January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2027.
Do I have a motion to call for this? Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to appoint Mr. James Haskell to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a 6-year term commencing January 1st, 2022, ending December 31st, 2027.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second the motion to appoint Mr. Haskell.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and second by Mrs. Coburn to appoint Mr. James Haskell to the Board of Zoning for a 6-year term commencing January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2027. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
To the Design Review Board, Mrs. Susan Nguyen, a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024.
Do I have a motion for this? Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to appoint Mrs. Susan Nguyen to the Design Review Board for a 3-year term commencing January 1st, 2022, ending December 31st, 2024.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that appointment of Mrs. Nguyen.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and second by Mrs. Coburn to appoint Mrs. Susan Nguyen to Design Review Board for a 3-year term commencing January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2024. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? She is appointed.
Also to the Design Review Board, Ms. Jolise Rogers, a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024.
Motion to appoint. Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to appoint Ms. Jolise Rogers to the Design Review Board for a 3-year term commencing January 1st, 2022, ending December 31st, 2024.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion to appoint Mrs. Rogers.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and second by Mrs. Coburn to appoint Mrs. Jolise Rogers to the Design Review Board for a 3-year term commencing January 1st, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2024. Are there any remarks? Mr. Heidig.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since this, before we appoint the last, vote on the last appointment, I do want to say these 4 appointments, Mr. Mayor, are, I don't know them personally, not, friends with them, hanging out and all that, but judging by what's happened, you've sent us 4 quality people for this time. And on a side note, I hope you're, in your free time, working on updating that resume, the questionnaire. But these are 4 quality people, so I do thank you for that. Thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Miss Rogers is appointed. Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make an announcement that tomorrow at 5:30 in council chambers, there will be a design review board meeting.
Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make an announcement, too, that the 2021 Home Halloween Decoration Contest is, the sign-up registration's online. They can either contact me, call me, I'll get them a link. It's on social media, too, as well. And the registration's going until the 15th, and the contest starts Saturday.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I would just like to let everyone know and give appreciation to the Barberton Police Department, and particularly the Detective Bureau, for finding and solving the robbery at Save-A-Lot, Subway, and 7th and Hoppekin. It was the same defendant in all 3 of those robberies.
Good to hear. Anyone else? Mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, just first, going back to Tuscarora Park, this wasn't an easy decision, and it was not a knee-jerk reaction, but, doing nothing is not an option. And the basketball courts will continue to be closed as we continue to evaluate the situation that was at Tuscarora Park and all the issues at all of our parks. So we're working on a bigger scale plan for all of our parks. For those of you that, you may not remember, we've had a few parks over the years who, someone, burnt down some of the parks in the past. And, Harder Park on the far north side, not much to that park. They burned down the equipment. Brightenstein Park. So there's a lot of issues, and we want to take control over those issues. The survey for Lake Anna, that closes October, Lake Anna Park, that closes October 20th. So we'll collect all the data, and there could be a second survey. Afterwards, we'll see what all the data says. So we'll go from there. And just want to, remark on the ribbon cutting from last week. R.D. Abbott, Novation SI, on Friday. They flew their CEO in and a few others, and what a great operation. They're going from about 25,000 square feet here in Barberton to over 127,000 square feet. And this is the building at the end of Foundation Place. Ravago was there previously, and we had been working with them for quite a long time, 6 or 7 years. And they were looking to go to Texas because they needed a 250,000 square foot building. Ended up going to Medina Township and building there, and so they were able to keep some of the Barberton employees that they had. We just didn't have the land to build a 250,000 square foot building. So this, we started working with Novation SI, and this is a great company with R.D. Abbott, great partnership, and a lot of great growth opportunities in that facility as we move forward. So very excited about what kind of little niche we're making there in that area with Akron Rubber Development Laboratories. A lot of research and design and laboratory space there that's being utilized. So great addition to the city, and look forward to future growth there. So, and then as I mentioned last week, working with the Belgium company Hanacard, which purchased a small business off of Waterloo Road there, and looking for that investment here in the city as well with future growth opportunities as well. So 2 big wins for the community here, and there's a lot of other wins that we're working on, and hopefully some more materializes here within the next few weeks that we can report on. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else from the body? With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Heidick that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are